Hello everyone, Ken here, and I wanted to just chat a bit about the Battlefront beta and the upcoming game, I guess. Now this footage is all from PS4. I ended up playing about half and half on PlayStation 4 and on PC. Just worked out that it's easier to capture on PS4. My PC isn't really up to the task of playing this game at the high resolution and also capturing it, so won't be the PS4 footage. But yeah, I really enjoyed this. I feel like with Call of Duty out this week and Fallout 4 out next week, StarCraft 2 expansion, Tomb Raider, it's almost been easy to forget about Star Wars, and that feels like a weird thing to say because there's been a ton of Star Wars hype. But right now, gaming wise, feels like it's sort of on the back burner, and I'm sure it'll come back around. But I do kind of worry that maybe it's going to get overlooked a little bit. I'm sure it'll do well because it's Star Wars, and Star Wars always does well, and it's good Star Wars from everything I experienced in the beta. Really captures that Star Wars feel super duper well. The sound design is phenomenal, as you'd kind of expect. I mean, DICE have always been great at sound design. One of the things Battlefield does really well, I think, is the way that they capture positional sound. So the way that sound will sound the way it should for where it's happening in the world. A lot of games like Call of Duty do have good sound placement, so you can tell where a sound's coming from, particularly with headphones on. There's always been a staple of that series, but its sound doesn't resonate necessarily the way that it does in Battlefield, where guns fired really sound different depending on where you are in the world. And you know, you combine DICE's incredible sound design with just those memorable tingle-inducing audio snippets from the Star Wars series. You know, the lasers, the TIE fighters, the Star Destroyers, the lightsabers, all that good stuff. And then also, of course, the score, the music, incredible. John Williams' incredible score. Most of this seems to be the music from the original series, pretty much, and that's kind of what you want. I think the entire game is based pretty much around the original trilogy, they've said, and then there's going to be expansions coming for the new stuff. So they're going to have one, I think it's the Battle of Jakku, which is for the new film, episode 7, that's due in a couple of months in the cinema, and that's going to tie in with that. So yeah, I really like it. I really like the kind of fast-paced. I heard a few people describe it as a PS2 game for the modern era, and I think that's pretty accurate. The way that everything's on these cooldowns, you know, you've got your laser rifles, and they're all very short cooldown. So instead of reloading, you should have to stop shooting for a few seconds. And they do also have that kind of instant reload mechanic, but it's very timing heavy. You can do quite good things with it if you're prepared to do that, if you get to grips with it. And it seems like they make it a little bit harder to hit the accurate reload every consecutive time you do it. They make that window a bit smaller that you have to hit. And obviously if you don't do it, it's kind of an active reload thing like Gears style, where if you miss it, then you're kind of screwed for a bit while you wait for your gun to sort itself out. Same with the health is recharging as well, so you've got to get cover for a few seconds. Kind of encourages you to dash in and out of fights, and there's plenty of cover because there's this big battlefield with rocks and such all over the place. And yeah, then the equipment follows a similar mechanic, so all the equipment's on quite short cooldowns. You know, you have the thermal detonator, which is your grenade equivalent, and that's on like a 9-second cooldown. The cycler rifle, which is a sniper that has a one-shot kill if you hit them in the head, and it's pretty good damage if you hit them in the body as well. You can finish them off very quickly. That's like a 7-second cooldown. And I guess the way they balance that is the more powerful things, the things like the shield, and conversely the iron shot, which basically counters the shield. It also counters vehicles and emplacements, but primarily it counters the shield by instantly removing it if someone's used the personal shield. And those have charges which you have to pick up on the map. Now, I heard a few people say they were running out of charges, but I'm quite a diligent person of picking stuff up whenever I see it, so I ended up generally having enough charges to do what I wanted. I didn't feel like I was... I think partly that's because I stuck mostly with the iron shot rather than with the shield. I did see some people doing some very interesting stuff with the shield, which I'll maybe talk about later when I talk about Drop Zone in a bit more detail. But I tended to stick with the iron shot, and I think that meant I was only using it when I wanted to shoot a vehicle or when I wanted to shoot someone with a shield, whereas if I had the shield, maybe I would have used it more frequently and run out of charges a bit faster. Other than that, I think one of the big things is first versus third person. You'll notice all this footage is in third person, and I started in first person. The game looks gorgeous up close in first person, but it's, as a competitive shooter, it's so much easier to play in third person. I remember playing Modern Warfare 2 back in the day. I went through a phase of about a month where I just played the third person playlist, and it feels like here you have such an advantage, because anyone who's playing in first person is obviously tied to quite a tight perspective, whereas in third person you can see round corners, essentially you can see over bits of cover, and it's not so much so that it's ridiculously overpowered, but it does give you a greater sense of scale and a greater sense of what's going on around you, better situational awareness. So I think really it's the way to play, and I'm quite happy with that. Because it does make it feel very different from Battlefield. Obviously Battlefield's a very traditionally sort of first person game, so having it mix things up by sort of saying, hey, you can play in first person if you want to immerse yourself in that way, but at the same time, Battlefront, I played the old Battlefront games primarily in third person, and that works here, and that's fine with me. I'm absolutely happy with that. Now we're taking a look at the moment at the Walker Assault mode, which is kind of, I guess that's their scale and spectacle mode. This is Star Wars, whereas Drop Zone feels more like the competitive game type. It's, hey, this is our more tightly balanced, I want a competitive shooter set in the Star Wars universe, whereas Walker Assault is, I just want to immerse myself in something that feels and looks and sounds like Star Wars, and Walker Assault really does kind of nail that. It's got that scale. It's got the skybox of all the Star Destroyers fighting each other, although I do kind of wish there was a bit more going on in the skybox, because there's usually about 4 to 6 player controlled craft going around in the sky, I think, between the TIE fighters and the A-wings and the X-wings, but it would be nice to see more stuff in the background, and I don't know how much that stresses the processors and whether that was too much for the machines to handle or something, or whether they just didn't want to clutter up the sky too much. But you see here they've got this beautiful clear sky, and where the fight actually happens is just over there on the right of the screen, and that's nice, but it's all kind of in one place, and it would be good to see it spread more across the sky than it is. All those clouds do look pretty, I'll give them that. There's an interesting kind of base to the tactics in this. It has, a lot of people have said, oh, the rebels are screwed from the start. The Imperial forces are way too powerful, and I think what it is what I realised over time is that the rebels can't mess up a single objective. So there's 3 stages, and at each stage you have to hold at least one of the 2 uplink points for a decent amount of time to get your Y-wings to come in. And then once the Y-wings come in, your team all have to damage the Walker. And if you mess up on any of those capture rounds or any of the damage rounds, you're pretty much not going to win. Whereas the rebels can obviously, they've only got to be successful, quote unquote, 1 time or 2 times, and that's probably enough. The rebels do get a slight catch-up mechanic. They get the kind of speeder with the hooks, so they can, as a large stitch thing, they can tie up one of the walkers and bring it down instantly, but it's possible for the Imperials to stop that, so definitely not a foolproof tactic. It's nice that they did put that in there as a potential catch-up mechanic, that's for sure. Other than that, I really did like this mode. I found that we did win as the rebels, but your A-wing fighters have got to be so on point. They've got to be hitting they've got to be dumping all their ammunition, all their shots into the walkers as soon as the opportunity comes up. You might have to have someone who's pretty skilled on the speeder, because if that gets messed up and that's your last chance opportunity, only 1 or maybe 2 people get a chance to do that, so you can really mess it up easily. But it's a great spectacle. It looks really good. The scale is fantastic. The walkers are kind of fun to drive, although they don't do as much as I would like. There are moments where the walkers feel a bit out of the action, and that's kind of a shame. But it's all good. They're still pretty fun to shoot when you actually do get the chance to get in there and wreck some face. As for the drop zone mode, as I say, this feels kind of like the more competitive mode, the more sort of professional, balanced, Call of Duty sort of style shooter, and the people rushing in, and lots of maneuverability. You see more people using the jetpack option and jumping around the map or claiming those little bits of high ground. And it's a really interesting map design that they put you on, because there's lots of these like low areas with the paths going between, and then there's lots of the high ground rock areas, and you really do benefit from being a little bit higher, but not so much so that you expose yourself to the other team. The capture mechanics are interesting. So you hold down the point or the pod, you run up to it, you hold square or F or X or E or whatever you've got it set to, and you hold that for a couple of seconds. That captures it for your team, and then you just have to defend it. And the way it's captured back is by someone doing the same, and it doesn't matter if your team's around it. If they just hold square next to it for just long enough, they'll capture it back, and it resets the capture timer. So it's interesting because that's where you do see, I had a couple of friends who were running the jetpack and the shield, and they jetpack in, pop their personal shield, and just rush the point, and just, they'd probably die in the end, but they'd live long enough with the shield that they'd be able to capture it. And you see this guy here is able to take the pod from us even though we're defending it, because we're not quick enough to take him down. So having the iron shot I think was really good for me, because I found that when people were doing that kind of thing, when they were trying to sneak in, people with the iron shot often didn't, or people with the personal shield didn't expect you to have the iron shot. So it kind of caught a lot of people off guard. They rushed in with a lot of bravado, when perhaps they should have been a little bit more careful. I like also when you capture a pod, it drops a few of the item rewards on the ground. And they're all the simple ones. There's no vehicles and there's no hero characters in Drop Zone, but you get the you get stuff like the orbital strike, which is quite powerful. That feels like one of the more powerful ones, or the smart rocket, which I had really almost no success with, even in Walker Assault, where there's buildings and such to hit with it. It didn't really feel like the smart rocket was especially useful. But there's a thermal imploder, which is basically a super grenade that has a huge explosion. That's pretty fun to use. Although I felt like, because I'd gotten so used to spamming the thermal detonator every time it was up, that I ended up throwing the thermal imploder a bit willy-nilly as well. I definitely got a lot of kills with both the regular and the super grenade over time, though. The orbital strike is pretty good. I had several occasions where I aimed it very carefully, and then just as I clicked the fire button, I clipped my view slightly on the edge of a rock and ended up dropping the orbital strike directly on my own head, which wasn't ideal, but there we are. Anything else I want to particularly talk about? Just thinking about that. Well, I guess I haven't talked about the heroes, so I'll have a quick say about those. They're interesting. I didn't get to play as Luke, but I did play as Darth, and they give him a lot of options, which is interesting because they're all on cooldowns, but if you rotate between them, like the force choke is essentially a ranged kill move, and there's Luke just hanging out, tried to attack the walker. That doesn't work, which is kind of disappointing that Luke can't get in and get under the walker, but I guess maybe that would be slightly too strong if he could do that. If he could do the I feel like he should be able to do that, but if he should be open to attack, so the Imperials can kind of stop him if they know what they're doing. They focus fire on him because he won't be attacking them directly. He'll be trying to take out the walker. Yeah, I used Darth Vader, and he has the Force Choke, which is just a ranged kill move basically, and the lightsaber throw functions as a ranged kill move. So it feels a bit like you just have a couple of different options, and you just rotate between them as the cooldowns go, and then you can get in there and swing about as well, and you can jump forward pretty quickly. It's quite fun to use them. They don't feel too strong. They do go down fairly quickly. It feels like you will always be able to get a few kills with them, and that's fine. My other top tip, cycler rifles go through most of the shields. They go through the personal shield, goes through the those big bubble shields that people can put down as one of the bonus pickups. So to keep an eye out for that. Cycler rifles are real nice. I did take to that. I didn't initially like it, but I took to it fairly quickly once I started using it, especially on Walker Assault. I did find the ranged attacks, and this is more noticeable on Walker Assault, ranged attacks were maybe slightly too accurate for my liking, because I felt like in Battlefield, when you're a certain distance away from people, unless it's a really good sniper, you can kind of run around a bit and you won't get taken down. You might get clipped by a bullet or two, but you're unlikely to get taken out. Whereas in this, I felt like if you were in just open ground, there's always, as soon as someone started shooting at you, you could just go down very, very quickly, even at very long range, because the guns are fairly precise. And actually, I think they were less precise on PS4. Now, I don't know whether that's because there's auto-aim on the PS4, like an element of the kind of auto-aim that drags your cursor a little bit towards the enemies to account for the fact that you're on sticks and not on the precise keyboard and mouse controls. But I wonder if because of the auto-aim, they didn't want it to be too accurate at long range, and so there's slightly more spread. Because on PC, it felt like I could nail people across the map on long range. But then again, I felt like even on PS4, other players were killing me pretty quickly from range. So maybe that was just I was getting a bit unlucky with my shots there. It's tough to say. But I hope it's not too accurate at very long ranges. Like on this map, I feel like it's fine, but you don't want people to be blaster rifling across the map. The cycler rifle, sure, that's what it's designed for, but not general blaster rifle. You don't want to have that be too long ranged. But the thing I like about the cycler rifle, I'll say before we finish, is the drop on it is basically none, but there's a little bit of time delay. It has a travel time, and that's good to see, and I like that mechanic to it. So overall, I'm really looking forward to actually getting my hands on this. I had a ton of fun. I really like Drop Zone. I enjoyed the spectacle of Walker Assault, and I think when I'm playing with friends, that's going to be the mode, because there's going to be a lot of us playing at once. But if I'm just playing on my own or just with a couple of mates, Drop Zone is going to be a ton of fun, just to get in there and be competitive. And I'm interested to see what other modes are going on as well, and to check out the other maps. Definitely want to see like an Endor style map. Seen a few clips of that from Paris Games Week and such. Looks great. So if you're excited for Battlefront, be sure to drop me a comment down below and let me know what you're looking forward to, what game types you're most excited about. If you played the beta, which ones you preferred, whether you preferred the Walker Assault Spectacle or the more competitive Drop Zone, and what you're looking forward to in the main game. And be sure to bop that like button, subscribe to the channel for more content, maybe some more Battlefront content once it's out. We'll see. Anyway, thanks very much for watching. I've been Ken, and I'll catch you next time. Cheers!